Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today for Construction Safety Research Alliance's Communities of Practice call for October. We're so excited to have you over here. And you may know us, but for a quick intro, we do these calls to share our research knowledge, ideas, and best practices. And we have an amazing panel here today to share experiences with you as well. Construction Safety Research Alliance is housed in the University of Colorado Boulder, and we're truly a strong community of industry leaders, academic experts, and safety professionals across all levels. And we do have only one goal, and that is to eliminate serious injuries and fatalities in construction and heavy civil industries. So, before I think that's enough for an introduction. Today's topic is going to be safety analytics, and there is so much excitement around this one because it is new, it's exciting, but there's not a lot of knowledge and not a lot of good best practices. So, hopefully, today we're going to cover a bit of our research and some very good learnings from this panel right here. So, I will dive into the research real quick so that we have enough time for the panel. All right, let me go into the research presentation. So, you may have seen this graph before, but it is the one that we show every single time. The reason why we're focusing on serious injuries and fatalities is this main picture. Our recordable injuries have been decreasing over the past 10 years. However, our serious injuries and fatalities flatlined, no pun intended, right? It is time to innovate and change how we approach serious injuries and fatalities. And one of the ways we can do that is through our data and through our analytics. Now, when we first started this journey, one of the first papers CSRA published was the invalidity of TRIR. We wanted to see if this total recordable injury rate that we use every single venue in safety is actually good. The researchers analyzed about 3.2 trillion worker hours of data. This is quite a lot of data. And what they have found was quite scary for a lot of analytics people because this metric that we have been using was not predictive of future performance, which is how we used it. It didn't predict fatalities, and it was statistically mostly random. So our response was two different research. I will cover both of them, but it won't be in depth. So please go to our website and read more about it. The first one is safety predictions, predictive analytics. Since TRIR wasn't predictive at all, and most of these injury rates fell into the same bucket because of the rare and random events that based on only failures, we were thinking that, okay, predictive analytics are not going to happen in just incident data. We needed better data that captures both success and failure so we can differentiate. Something that we have continuous and plenty data for, basically, and something that we can look at proactively. Incidents we can learn from, obviously, those are past failures, but we needed data that predicted future. So that is how high energy controls assessments were actually designed. HECA was designed for predictive analytics. And really quickly, what HECA captures is the amount of high energy hazards in an environment that is controlled with a direct control. We have plenty of material on that. I will not go into it. But once this HECA risk metric, monitoring metric, was captured, we were actually able to do some very, very advanced analytics as a kind of a state of the art proof that HECA could work in predicting serious injury and fatality risk. So that means that we had a bunch of predictors and HECA data, and we were able to calculate the probability of a serious injury and fatality risk appearing or not. That's what you're seeing on this screen right here. Now, this is not an ongoing project, it's a past project. I would really encourage you to go and read it. But it proved us that we can actually do predictive analytics on our proactive data sets, which was quite revolutionary. So, really do recommend going in and looking at it. The next piece of literature I wanted to share with you is high quality metrics, alternatives to TRIR work. Now, here, what we have done is we asked the question, okay, what is a high quality metric? I mean, safety analytics people want to be good, so we want to give them some quality metrics. These were, we wanted our metrics to be predictive, valid, and objective, of course, but we also wanted them to be clear, functional, and important. And when I say important, I mean important for serious injury and fatality prevention. Now, we have evaluated every single metric we could find based on this criteria. And what we have found is every single metric that we have in our safety literature is strong in different ways. For example, safety leading indicators tell us how well we design our safety system. Lagging indicators like TRIR, fatality rates, CIF rates, etc., tell us how much our system fails. These two in combination gives us plenty information about our safety management. They complete each other. They're distinct pieces of information that we can show in our dashboards. That was one of the outcomes of this research. And ultimately, we ended up in this note, and this is what we're analyzing and what we're researching right now, is that safety metric, there is no silver safety metric, right? There is no silver bullet. So we really need to think about an ecosystem when we're trying to use these analytics to give better information to decision makers. And this ecosystem looks like this. We need to have leading indicators that we know about our system, how we design it. We need to have monitoring metrics, looking at our system at a present tense and seeing what is going on a daily basis. And of course, our traditional lagging indicators with incident rates and etc. So this is kind of where the research is. And I really do encourage you to go read more and research more about these. Because at the end of the day, how well you use these different metrics for decision making is going to be how well you can use your safety analytics. With that, I think that's all I have. So hopefully I didn't steal too much time from the panel, but I'll just move on to the panel right away. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to have you over here. And I am going to kick off the conversation real quick. But before you start talking for your first time, please introduce yourself so that the audience gets to know you. The panel questions are all about how to use safety analytics and dashboarding to inform decision making and changing behavior. So there's so much to talk about for sure. But I would like to start with Bob. So, Bob, I would like to ask you, how do you work from these like traditional business planning metrics, etc., to actually operationalizing safety and some of these new things that we've been doing?
So this is Bob Spencer. I'm a senior program manager with Tennessee Valley Authority. For those who don't know what Tennessee Valley Authority is, we're the largest public power provider in the U.S. We do generation and transmission. Our system is based with nuclear, coal, gas, hydro, solar. We run about 11,000 annual employees. We augment that with another 2,000, and currently we probably have about 8,000 contractors on site building out our portfolio. For your question is traditional business planning versus operational. So when we first built our dashboards, they were what I call traditional, which is fiscal year to date business planning, executive reporting out. That is not that works for half the company and not the other side of the company. We were integrating more into what I call operational side of business planning, where dates don't mean as much and there's no resets. So we go from trending to 7 days, 14 days, 30, 60, 90 to 12 months rolling. So we have two distinct audiences, the business plan side and the people that I call the wrench turner side that want to know what's going on and it doesn't reset for us.
Absolutely. You want to follow that up, Brian?
No, I appreciate what Bob's talking about there. We definitely have different sort of audiences that we're speaking to when we're creating data and then we're delivering data. A lot of what we've been focusing at Skanska is making sure the right piece of information is getting to the right person at the right time to inform decisions, but also impact behavior. Um, so some examples of that just could be data that are linked to our sort of our work practices. So this could be what we call our pre-task plans or our daily hazard analysis. There's a process that people need to actually start those, finish those, and those need to be reviewed when performance metrics about who is actually doing them, who is completing them, who is reviewing them was kind of hidden or only visible to the to leadership, we didn't really get the same sort of turnover improvement in process. But when that information was kind of littered all over the place, where they log in, it's visible who's doing what. We saw very dramatic changes in performance just by putting the right information in the right place. And so that's something we want to build on going forward and making sure that there's a thirst for this data and that the right data is getting to the right hands at the right time. And I did not introduce myself. My name is Brian Karras. I'm the National EHS Program Director for Building for Skanska. Um, 10 years with the company and then 3 years with CSRA. So thanks for being here this morning and I appreciate the discussion.
Thanks, Brian. It's like you're doing the mic drop first and then introducing yourself. I do like your style. I really want to go back to Bob because I wanted to ask that. Okay, so there are different types of information, but there's also a lot of incident data, failure data you have. Is it, are people demanding that kind of data, or do they want to see more proactive things? And how do they change between these two groups that you were talking about?
So on our side, yes, they want to see more of the proactive side of the house. And for our operational database or dashboard side, we actually brought in the crafts and the frontline supervisors to learn what they want to see on that side. So one of our challenges I always talk about is when we drive the injuries down to very low, what do you look at? And that's what we're starting to do now. So, for example, we are in our typical outage season right now. And the way we have our dashboard set up is what has happened last night reports out this morning to the to both the management then the frontline supervisors and the workers have the ability to see it. So we are trying to feed them real time data in that sense, mostly on observations, good catches, near misses, driving that kind of quality and that behavior of and focused on an engagement for us more than the lagging side.
Absolutely. And I want to go to Mark real quick here, because they're coming from, like, everybody's coming from this traditional background of only reporting incidents, and we're all changing. And I think Mark has been doing some great, great things with Exelon on the more proactive side. So, Mark, you want to take the lead for a second here?
Sure. Uh, Thanks, folks, for having me here. Really good to hear some background stories from both Brian and Bob. My name is Mark Musser, Senior Manager of Performance Assessment at Exelon. For those who don't know Exelon, fairly large utility, and primarily the East Coast, but we have four parent or four sister utilities: Baltimore Gas Electric, which is primarily Maryland-based; Pepco Holdings, which is three sub-utilities, which is primarily focused in DC, Maryland, Delaware, and South Jersey areas. We have PECO, which is our Pennsylvania-based utility. And then our largest utility is ComEd over in Illinois, which serves the city of Chicago and its outskirts. So our landscape is pretty broad when it comes to our journey, our safety journey here. And we have the advantage of sharing best practices across multiple jurisdictions and multiple workforces across the nation here. So it's a big advantage for us. And we can use that to kind of learn and continue to grow. What I wanted to focus on today to kind of kick this off is kind of our transition, if you will. You heard a lot of from Brian and Bob and Leaf on the traditional metrics on lagging indicators and how we're going to get on top of that. We recognize that we had to change that mantra and we shift towards energy-based safety in a lot of different ways to help reduce SIFs overall. That's the ultimate goal of reducing workplace SIFs that happen. Um, and we quickly learned that this is not going to be a sprint. It's kind of taking a crawl, walk, run approach into how we tackled and tried to shift the minds of folks to think differently about safety and how we're going to get there along this journey of EBS that we're going on. Um, Things like TRR have 30 years. You heard Elise say trillions of data points, and EBS is brand new. So Exelon's background is we started this journey in 2022, where we introduced it to the company. Right here is what a SIF definition is. Here's the definition of energy-based safety, the safety classification learning model. How do you classify events? And that really was the kind of the spearhead to starting our revised safety journey or changing how we think differently about safety. But once we rolled it out to the organization, one of the challenges we had was, well, how are we going to practice kind of what we rolled out? What tools are we going to arm our business with to reinforce the new safety journey that we're on? And we recognize that we need to give the folks a mechanism to help practice what they've learned and help understand, are the concepts being reinforced? What should we reinforce? And how can we learn from all this data that we want to collect? And that kind of fast forward a bit, we introduced something called an energy-based observation tool, which is what we use to capture and track Hecate data. There's a lot. I know we have a lot more probing questions coming up here on our EBS journey, so I don't want to steal too much thunder. But the transition that we've seen in the technology enablement and partnership has really spearheaded our understanding of Hecate data and how we can continue to use analytics to advance us moving forward. But above all, it's how do you disseminate that information? You heard Bob talk about how do people get the right info, right? How do you share that in a condensed, concise format? And we do that by ensuring that each layer of the organization gets a piece of the pie that they need, so to speak. So there's trending data at more for boards and executives, which is what trends are we seeing at an overall perspective across. What are some high level insights? As you get kind of more individual, lower down to the organizations, what's in it for me? Is it more your periodic reviews? Is it more individual to your operating or your span of control for your operating boundaries? We call them barns in some places, but think of it like your service centers, if you will, across. How low do you go, and how do you disseminate that information, and what's most critical to them? And we've set up automatic reports that help speak to these, so you can find out what's in my part of the area of the business, what's my areas of concern. What are we seeing? What are we not seeing in terms of high energy hazards in the presence of controls? And how can I make it more personal to my morning huddles and morning conversations to help reduce the potential of having SIFs? And we've seen a lot of benefits to doing so as part of our dashboard creations when we started to collect Hecate data. I'll pause there, Leif. I want to go a little bit deeper, but I know some of the questions might help us go deeper in that conversation. Is there anything else?
That's a really good intro. And I know I have my questions. But I just received a text message with a very good question, so I'll just ask it. It was a weird way to receive one, but we'll take it because I think it's really good. So he said, and that was coming from PG&E. He said that we are building these really good dashboards. We're actually having all of this data. We think it is high quality. There are good insights in it, and we can do so much with the data, right? And I think like wasn't a part of the question, but we get it from a lot of different people. Like there's the SBLI, severity based lagging indicator, there's the safety classification and learning model, there's the HECAs, and there's all of these other leading indicators that we didn't even start talking about. So I wanted to ask the panel, how do you make sure people actually access this data? And is it a part of your job also? And how do you make sure that it is used and makes a difference, right? Or just doesn't sit on a dashboard? Who wants to take it first? I see Brian laughing, so I'll just call you out.
As a veteran of someone who's created many a dashboard that no one has looked at, I appreciate this question immensely. And so I think the trick is just to bring back to what Bob was talking about, is realizing there really are different audiences for data. And if you can really sort of cater your information to those different audiences, you're going to get better buy-in. And I think the most satisfying layer to create data for is the registers, like Bob was saying, the people in the field. So, and like Mark was saying, like what's in it for them. So if you can have the data actually mean something to them to inform a decision they're going to make that day, you're not going to have a lot of problem with people using it. It's going to catch on through word of mouth. People are going to talk about it on their own. And I think that's where, when you know you've succeeded. I've definitely created metrics that were too ambiguous in nature that even leadership's like, well, what does that mean? So, just try, keep going. But I think really think about those different audience levels will definitely help. And I will pause there.
Anyone else with a 2 cents?
I can go, Bob, unless you're ready. I'm kind of prepared for this one. So, like Brian, I have helped or been a creator of many dashboards that have gone into this empty hole, right? Um, so, what we've really tried to take a concerted effort is that a lot of things nowadays are all dashboards. This is not just particular to safety, but really across the spectrum of data collection points you can have. Is everyone wants to make a dashboard for it, which is good in many ways. But the disadvantages because then you have to remember, well, which dashboard does what again? How do I go here? What's the purpose of this, right? So what we've really tried to do here at Exxon is centralize as much as we possibly can and eliminate redundant sources of data, right? There can be, and the second, I guess before I move on, the second part of that is providing clarity as to the purpose of each dashboard, right? Oftentimes we see things try to do too much, and it kind of muddies up the intent and gets busy, if you will, in terms of what you can use it for. So we've really tried to separate and condense where we can. So each dashboard has a unique purpose. Some direct examples for looking at HECA data is to make this real for folks is kind of broke out into three major categories because HECA data can be a lot just to take in, just because of the amount of data that we collect and how complex some observations can be when collecting HECA data. First one is just simply tracking. This is more of a quantity perspective. Just say, hey, who's doing what, how many, and where are they from, just for normal accountability. And that's just a dashboard by itself that is also automatically emailed on a weekly basis to the organization. So that helps streamline some of that effort. Second one is an overall summary, which is kind of tracking and trending. How many EBOs have we done holistically? You can filter down pretty well. What's your HECA scores look like by month, by year, by hazard, by department, and that's up to the user to define. And these are really just get high level trends to see how we're progressing. And that last one is really tied to detail, right? Is how do you get down to the quote unquote nitty gritty? How do you get more details around the types of exposures you're seeing? Where are they? And what learning opportunities have we seen from those? So that three-tiered approach to help kind of refine and reduce and point people to the right direction really helps. And I can't stress this enough. The last piece is communication. Make sure that folks understand where it is, what the purpose is, and try to allude to that somewhere in your dashboards. And eliminate redundant or old or retired data sets. I think that's going to be a big piece of that, so you don't have this back and forth. But it sounds like a perfect process here. It's still going to be a work in process. Um, but that's kind of a little bit about how we try to make it relevant for folks. That's a great question from whoever texted it in. It's a challenge that we've had for quite some time.
Yeah, and I'll add an agreement with my peers. Um, if you look at what we done, we started our dashboard probably 10 years ago, and we have this huge, amazing dashboard that a data geek just loves. But the average person can't work their way through it because we just added and added and added, and let's cut it this way, let's cut it that way. And that's exactly where we are today. We're going back to the basics, separating the two systems, operational versus business planning, and making it a more simple, easier use data and controlling our data. One of the things we let everybody touch our data, which didn't work well for us because then everybody created more dashboards on us on that side. So we are definitely in the process of simplifying and controlling who's who's able to get to our data and how they show their data.
Absolutely. I think we got into a very good discussion out of this one. It's this graveyard of dashboards issue. But I want to go on to a more positive note. Like, don't despair, the audience. My next question is going to be about what kinds of successes or insights that you can tell us about, and what have you seen to be most impactful in achieving your goals in safety analytics? Who wants to take it first? All right, I see. All right, I'm going to call out you, Mark. Go ahead.
Sure. I'd be happy to take this one first. So I think this is a multi-tiered kind of answer that I'm going to have here. Is that there are so many insights, and my focus is going to be really on EBS and Hecate data, just to be transparent, um, because that's kind of like the bulk of our data collection now. Um, there are two things that we've seen as far as being most impactful is to say, well, are we being safer? That's kind of the question we want to answer ourselves, right? And how do you measure that? Well, the really easy one is to say, well, have we had any SIFs? What's our SIF count look like, right? That's only a small piece of that equation, right? The bigger things are we seeing an increase in the amount of hazards that our folks are observing? Why or why not? Are they being consistent with other folks, right? So if you look at take somebody out in rural Chicago, outskirts of Chicago, for example, and they're witnessing a same job or a like job that's happening in the middle of the city of Wilmington, Delaware, what are the similarities and differences just from being geographically so far apart and understanding your expectations to do your job safely, right? What does that comparison look like? What we're seeing is that we have an increase over time in the amount of hazards that are being recognized. And by default, just that increase in awareness makes the workforce more prepared to respond or prepared to fail safely or have the capacity to fail is what we're seeing. The second part of this equation is how often are we seeing jobs being coached, interrupted, paused, for whatever reason, whether it's clarification, whether it's uh, 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 a direct control that's not being used properly, one that should be available that's not, or anything else in between. What does that job interruption frequency look like, and what types of behaviors are we coaching on? And what we're seeing is that we've seen almost a 50% increase in those coaching opportunities from 2024 when we launched this observation program to today, year to date today. And we're only, 3/4 of the way through the year. So we expect that to keep going up. And we didn't have line of sight to that before, right? We had line of sight as to, condition reports when we had precursor events and things like that. But now we're getting more of a direct line of sight as to say, I stopped this job. This was the task that we were doing. These were the controls that were either missing or supposed to be in place, et cetera. So we're getting a lot more deliberate information that's helping us shape the future for how we can more proactively stay on top of safety. And that's really the huge bread and butter that we've been seeing from these EBOs moving forward. I'll pause there and I'll turn it over to, back to Lee for maybe Brian or Bob if they want to add anything to the insight.
No, I'll throw it back to Brian right away.
No, that's great, Mark. I think was reflecting on your response and Leaf's question in terms of successes, because it's important to talk about those, because I think all of us are like-minded when we want to talk about the next problem. I kind of indicated this earlier. We were dealing with the issue where we have this process of creating a daily hazard analysis, something the crew does. This is something that needs to be started and completed and needs to be reviewed by supervision. And if you're interested, there was a way to get in there and find out if those things were being done. We have audit process and everything else, but it took quite a bit of effort. There's a lot of friction to getting that information. And so a lot of times these weren't getting done. But just changing the structure of that data, making it visible at all levels in ways that was really easy to understand, traffic lighting thresholds, just really clear understandings of what good and bad and not so great look like. On their own, that these processes improve. There was sort of a race to the top in competition. And so that showed me that our business at every level was interested in data and wanted to use it if it was easy to get to. And it's really inspired us to really think about those sort of next generation of qualitative metrics that are also going to improve behavior in the field and at all levels. And the challenge into us is just like Mark was talking about, communicating those, putting them in the right places. But people are interested in data. And everyone is. And so it's really just trying to make it sort of right sized and really easy to understand. And as we are moving into energy based safety as well, we're using the safety classification learning model in terms of categorizing incidents. Those are entering in and showing data around those. It's been really encouraging to see that vocabulary just be introduced into everyone's language. I'm hearing people at all levels talking about high energy, talking about direct controls. And I think that's another sort of success where if your data is actually changing how people are talking about safety, on the project level and in the boardroom, then you've done something important. So we're going to keep moving in that direction and encourage that people are interested in data. We just need to deliver the right kind of data to the right people at the right time.
You know, I'll add to that the most impactful improving safety. The dashboards made our data transparent for us and to our employees. So that put it in real time. It was transparent, and we gained trust back. There's no more secrets. The union shares our data, the employees share our data on that side. And then our integration again to energy based safety is probably the most impactful currently on that side because we were in the system very early on. With help studying it, but we're very late of implementation, I call it on that side, because we are doing it in building blocks. We're doing it with everybody has to understand the hazards before they go to the sticky. So that process, we're really reteaching them how to fish and how to be safe out there on that side. So I mean, energy-based safety is definitely the one that's driving it forward.
And I want to add, Bob was actually one of the original contributors to the predictive analytics research that we had. So they have been no stranger to EBS at all. All right, so I think those were really, really good, but all of these, I realize that all of our questions are leading us to a problem, which is honestly how we think about analytics. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I did receive a question here that I want to direct to you in the Q&A, and that is about direct controls. There has been a lot of heartburn about people being able to assess the existing of direct controls or any controls really, because they've been seeing inconsistency issues, right? Some people give credit to things and that is your data flow. So at the end of the day, you're getting some data that is a little bit jumbled and we're pushing for consistency, but that's not always possible. um are you finding this to be a problem, and how do you manage that? Brian, I saw you shake your head, so I'm gonna go for
Yeah.
you.
I think Mark has some important stuff to say about this too. I think we're sort of on a starting position. Mark, I would put us at the crawl level on controls and direct controls at this point. Yeah, we are definitely seeing inconsistencies in terms of categorization and almost maybe wishful thinking in some cases in terms of whether a control is a direct control, which I think is not bad. If you want it to be a direct control, that's a audience that will use a direct control at some point in the future. So in terms of like defining and operationalizing those definitions, examples help a ton. We've been investing in some AI tools called Safety Sidekick, where we're hoping it puts that information close at hand. Where if you have a question about for this sort of task, what sort of direct controls are there, um, that's helping some, I believe. We're also trying to embed it in our planning tools. So we're actually defining for folk what of the controls are actually direct controls, and we'll move on to alternate as well. So I think it's kind of a multi-prong attack, so to speak, in terms of making sure that the definitions are available all over the place. There's engaging content for people who are asking those follow-up questions. And in some cases, we're taking the guesswork out where we're actually embedding it into the tools that we have for planning straight off the bat.
How about you, Mark?
So I'll try to keep this as condensed as possible to kind of give you how we rolled this out, which ties into a lot of what Brian just mentioned about the definitions, restrictions, and I also see some comments in the chat on pre-clean data to keep the energy buckets crisp, etc. Um, so how before what we do at Exelon is we understand that from a data collection standpoint, analytics, in order to act, you have to be confident that your data going in is appropriate, right? Old saying, garbage in, garbage out. Just being facetious slightly. And we wanted to try to get on top of that in terms of what folks can see, use, and understand. And we do that by means of before anyone can go and perform, and collect Hecka data. There's a requirement that they must go through an 8-hour one-day training. And that 8-hour one-day training highlights and provides those definitions along with workbooks, examples, practice sessions in the classroom setting. And then there's an aptitude test or a test at the end that is a certification that you pass or fail, right? And this kind of a test that you have the understanding that you understand what direct controls are. We provide them with a list of what they are, a list of limited controls, a list of the hazards that they may face, as well as some examples. And lastly, we kind of walk them through the tool that they use with those examples so they can practice what they're actually going to be doing out in the field, which I think has really strengthened the data quality. So in the tool, to be specific, what am I talking about? Well, the tool also only has a limited options for direct and limited controls per task that you select. So, for example, if I'm doing a pole set job, actually, I'll make it easier. If I'm doing like a work area protection job and I know that I got to set up my cones, set up my zone that I'm working in, I can't say that fast trip is a control, for example. It doesn't make any sense. It's not applicable to the situation, right? So that won't even show up in their list of things that they can choose as far as available controls go. And we feel as that really helps strengthen the quality of these observations. So that reinforces our stance that we want to get, that the data we're getting in is good. But we didn't really stop there, right? After we've collected Hecka data for some time, we recognize that there's still some opportunity to clean up the data, to get more uniform and to get a better understanding. So we try to put guardrails that say, well, what from a minimum data collection standpoint, good, bad, and different, do we need to satisfy at least that this is a well-rounded piece of information that we're going to act on? And for example, we recently put out that all observations, for every observation, you must have 2 or more high energy hazards. So for example, for every job, we were unable to find a case where there was only 1 hazard for any job that we saw, right? So in order to strengthen the quality, it's 2 or more hazards. When you're doing your control analyses for these, for every lack of direct control, and we understand and recognize that we're not going to have direct controls for all these jobs, not an expectation. But for every lack of direct control, you have to have 2 or more limited controls in place. Again, we were unable to find a situation where you could not have 2 or more limited controls for every lack of direct control. So that, coupled with the advantages that we have from technology, from the tool that they use, combined with some minimum expectations, we're really getting stronger data in. And it's also reinforcing folks' understanding of EBS in the process, that they can understand why certain controls are not applicable and why not. And lastly, it's just communication. The definitions are available. There's a dedicated website that ties to like Hecka data. Definitions are also provided in the dashboards that we produce. And our safety teams and human performance teams across all of the utilities that I mentioned earlier do a really good job at being that central point of truth when questions come up. So it's been a really organic kind of evolution. And we feel as if we're in a good state, but as always, there's always room for improvement. And the more we collect, the more we can see how we continue to improve on the data we're collecting to act on it in the best way possible.
Absolutely. That's awesome, Mark. Bob, anything else to add to this one?
No, I was just going to add is we're not there yet, and that's okay for us. It is on our roadmap. When we built business plan indicators, we encourage quantity, not quality on that side, and that's really hurt us. So we have to readjust. We're readjusting and learning. So as we go through energy-based safety, we want to make sure they understand the hazards. This June, we're getting into what we call phase 2, which is the stuff that will kill you, and then starting to get into controls. It is important to us. We watch it on the backside, um, but we don't report out yet on it because we really want to build that foundation to get quality in the future.
And I think that's really important for us, like this audience who is also mostly just starting, like dipping their toes into it and trying to get going. We hear this argument over and over, right? Quantity over quality or quality over quantity. And I believe both had some advantage, but at the end for EBS, it seems like quality will be more important. Would you agree with that, Bob?
Yes, yeah, and especially to our past sins that we drove quantity more than quality on that side. So we have to readjust on there.
And I want to follow up with some of the connections. So for EBS data, it's all good and well. We're looking at the risk on a real time. We're talking about direct controls. People are talking about direct controls. But it seems a little disconnected from what you have been doing with the incident rates and TRIR and SPLI and all that lagging indicators. Have you explored any connections in between? And of course, we didn't yet talk about leading indicators, and I know that's also in your purview. So, like, how would you put this picture together today? It's a hard question. It's also still in research, so I'm not too much on the spot. But what are your thoughts, Brian? You want to take it? You're in the project energy based risk assessment, so
Yeah,
you have
I was
ideas.
hoping Bob was going to take a swing at that first, but then I could follow up. But I can try. So I do think it's connecting around the high energy assessments that our project's working on. I think that is the connecting piece. Um, I do think there is a pretty strong connection between planning and implementation for energy-based safety that I think is pretty close at hand. So what I mean by that, I think we can do a better than average job at identifying the expected sources of high energy for a task. We can also do a better than expected job of identifying the available direct controls for those hazards and alternate controls when not. And through HECA or a HECA-like process, uh, we can do a pretty good job of getting in the field and seeing if not only are those actually only high energy sources that were present, but were they controlled? So I think that combination, the metrics around those, I think are pretty strong, um, and I think are available to most folk, even imperfectly. In terms of connecting it to lagging, I do think Cicera is not a fan of sort of creating rates around SIF, but I do think all of us are going to and probably will have something that looks at how are we doing? Are we doing better than last year? Is this region doing better than that? And so I think that will be the last piece. Is just you've done all this work in terms of planning, you've done all this work in terms of operationalizing and see if it's done in the field. What was the effect in terms of actual serious injuries and fatalities in for your company, for your region, for your project?
Absolutely, Bob.
Yeah, we're kind of the same way as we integrate this. The only thing we've added into our system, um, be, because we don't want that quantity. When we go out and measure energy-based safety and how you are and what you're doing, we do assessments, and it's a assessment of crafts, frontline supervisors, managers, subject matter experts of energy-based safety. We're going to go out and do the assessment at the sites, and they're going to agree as a team, do you have it or not? We're not going to go back and you have to do so many observations. You have to do so many of this stuff. We're really trying to drive that behavior, and it's part of daily business on that side. So we're integrating all this, and we go out and see when we go out to do our assessments, and we want to see how they're using all the tools together and how it works. But we are really trying to stay away from a metrics from it right now.
How about you, Mark?
I have a little. Can everyone hear me? There we go.
Yeah,
There's,
yeah, you're good.
Okay, perfect. This is an opportunity area for us, just to be transparent. Um, we are still, I guess, in the process of trying to tie in, job briefs to HECA data to SIFs and just ultimate CRs. And what does that story look like, right? Um, it's not an easy question, but what we're trying to do is leverage some kind of AI to help us at least get a starting point. Here are some things that we're kind of thinking of is we understand that the job brief itself is the best leading indicator we can have. We understand that HECA data is more of setting a pulse of where the organization is. It won't tell you ahead of time, but it might help you prevent things from happening in the future. And then lastly is between the pre-job brief quality, between the pre-job briefs and the HECA data that we're collecting, how can we associate that to SIFs, right? Or what kind of SIF reductions have we seen in this? Um, it's a work in progress. I would say the the next steps that we're taking is we are launching a pre-job brief quality assessment, mobile enablement, much like our observations for HECA data. And our understanding is that there will be a direct tie into the quality of the conversations, tied to the observations that are done as a result of that job. And we should start to be able to see that story become organic in terms of SIF reductions because of these. Data availability is a challenge for us. A lot of the pre-job briefs and qualities are all pen and paper. We have to help translate that to a system to help dissect it. So we need to just accelerate ourselves to, we'll say, modern technology to help us get there. In terms of starting, a lot of the feedback and questions that I've heard from some things today in the crawl, walk, run stage is another common thing I keep hearing. Don't let perfections, stand in your way of just starting something, right? If you wait until we solve all these before we start collecting the data and changing the way, I think we'll just be in this ever revolving door where we won't get anywhere, right? So my only bit of advice is you have to just try something new in terms of getting outside your comfort zone. And with the work that Dr. Leaf and the CSRA team has helped us with standardization, that's critical to sharing best practices, lessons learned. I just implore all of you just to start the journey. You won't regret it. We've seen a lot of positive impacts from it. And this is that next step is now we're tying this directly to SIF reduction. This is exactly how we're going to do so. So I'm excited for this piece of it.
That is awesome. And I think that is a really good question for some of the audience questions we have in the chat. So we talked about kind of moving towards the more technology use and trying to use AI. So the question is any of our panelists utilize AI to process any of this information that you collect? And their question was specifically for observations and value-based engagements. But I would go even too far that AI is coming and data analytics will change forever, and it has started changing. How do you see that growing and evolving in the next chapter of our analytics journey, I guess? It's a hard question. Who wants to take it first?
I'll take a quick stab. So, the AI's ability to grab and make sense of unstructured data is impressive today, and it's only going to get better and better. So there's a lot of information that's kind of buried in, descriptions and text and all sorts of things that do not have discrete fields or values. So I do think that's something that it can help folks today in terms of coming up with summaries that can better inform decisions and behavior. Some of the things we're doing now is creating almost AI assistance for sort of healing data at its source. So we've developed some things that help folks write an instant description that substantiates the SEL category better. So, you can paste in what you thought was a good instant description, and it's going to evaluate and see if the 4 questions were answered in that description. Say, hey, you didn't actually identify the energy source, and yada, yada, yada. And then once complete, it actually can spit out the SEL category and a couple of work processes for us. So I think In terms of the specific question, in terms of evaluations, I've seen that in terms of looking at photos, and I think safety function has something for this Leaf as well, where it can take a photo and identify hazards. So I do think it's going to be more and more present going forward. For Skanska, I think we're really concentrating on sort of augmentation of humans, not sort of taking some of the decision making away. At least that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, we're in the very early stages. Being a federal entity, we weren't allowed to touch or say the word AI with any of our data for a long time. Um, we are using it a lot to confirm some data. We are using it to what he said about looking at the text and the language. Just the other day we were using it heavily to figure out if it's lone workers or workers working in crews getting hurt on that side with 5 years of historical data. We use it a lot to confirm something we've already looked at and just trying to look at it a different way. The one thing I really liked about it is we are moving to, everybody thinks moving to like Power BI, like that's the buzzword, that's where everything's moving to. um, we are using AI to write code. We are bypassing a lot of our IT guys on that side and writing stuff in DAX that we don't. I mean, we're not proficient with it, but when we run into a problem with Power BI reports and dashboards, we go right to AI, and literally it's solving our problems in minutes, where we'd have to wait days for that stuff to be built or code to be built on that side. So we're really heavily using it to help build our dashboards behind the scenes.
Mark, anything else to add?
Yes. So similar to my fellow panelists here, Brian and Bob, we have attempted to use AI to help summarize things, validate some stances and some data collection things that we're having. We're also thinking about it in a couple different means. We do have what's called it's not really a chat VBE, but the value-based engagement is part you were talking about, Elite. We understand and recognize that chatbots like ChatGPT-esque, pick your flavor, are really independent of the user's ability to be able to communicate with the tool effectively, right? If you can't communicate with it effectively to get what you want, you might get results that are non-desired or maybe misrepresented in some way. So what we've done is we actually use that same background or bones, if you will, to create automatic insights using AI on our value-based engagements. Some of those topics are like summarizing general consensus for leadership topics, safety topics in particular. And it's really been beneficial to drive actions that are targeted at each individual location that's receiving this feedback. So to summarize, don't let folks talk to the bot. You have the bot do the thing you want the folks to find. And that's been a huge advantage to us. Second part of that is using AI and technology. I heard Bob mention, I think Bob mentioned photos and photo analyses. Maybe that was Brian, I'm sorry. What we're really trying to do here is leverage image recognition and AI and support HECA dispositions. And we're just starting this journey, to be clear. So we have not operationalized this, but what we've seen so far from pilots, it can only reinforce expectations when it comes to collecting HECA data, and really be served as a training tool. Is really what we're thinking about using this for. Is hey, I'm an observer. I saw all this stuff out in my observation, and now let's run it through the AI to validate or see what that saw versus what I saw. And what's the comparison between that? Now, there's a lot of debate on operationalizing this, just to be transparent. We see a huge risk of folks, for example, going out to the job site, taking a photo, saying AI did this and hitting submit, right? Yeah. So that's a risk area for us. So we're trying to figure out, well, what's the best intervention to the organization? How can we best leverage this kind of technology to our advantage? And we're leaning towards, and the key word is leaning towards, some kind of training or opportunity or some kind of sandbox that folks can go and reaffirm what they might have saw, just like a learning tool. But more to come on AI. Those are just two examples of how we're thinking about AI in safety.
Absolutely. Those are very, very good examples. And I think it'll get everybody thinking. It certainly got me thinking. But we do have 5 minutes, so I can only take one more question. And we do have so many thoughts and questions in the chat. I think for our both closing thoughts and as a closing discussion, I'd like to choose this one. So the question is, there is a lot of turnover in our companies, right? You produce your data, you have all of this SIF prevention efforts, you understand energy, you know what sticky is, you know what a direct control is. But how do you bring somebody like new safety personnel or new contractor up to speed? And how do they integrate into this whole system that you've been building and communicating? I'll get very short answers. Don't have much time. Who
I-
wants to take it?
I'll go real quick. We actually are starting to build that into our dashboards that we see how many employees are coming in and crafts coming in every day, and we're using them as a focus group of risk to make sure our safety professionals go out there and retrain them. And we're
That's a
watching
very
what we
good.
call churn when we change supervisors out too.
It's a big challenge. So we're trying to embed these in things that people are doing already. So little hints in orientation, putting them on posters, just little bites that get people curious. And then once they dig in deeper, they get the full fire hydrant of information at that point.
We have launched a formal onboarding process for any identified safety person and or supervisor who is field facing that will have direct safety responsibilities. We've actually broken it down into a 2-day onboarding session, so all FLS and safety pros receive the same training, and it's systemic across. Day one is field supervisor training, and day two is now the energy-based safety training that I was alluding to with the 8-hour requirement. It's going really well, and how have we done that? How have we operationalized it? We've done it by job code. So anyone who's onboarded, promoted, onboarded in any way to this position, regardless of their prior history. So say, for example, they were a frontline supervisor, moved to some IT role, I'm making it up, and then came back to a construction job, they would still be flagged to take the training. So that we found great success in that and help make sure the message remains consistent for the high turnover that we do see in some areas.
And those are very good strategies. And as my very last question to close it, I know we had questions, we didn't get to all of them, but I think the conversation was very dynamic and very informative. So thank you all. I would like to get your closing thoughts. So if you could give one advice to the audience, what would that be in their safety analytics journey? And I'll give you 1 second to think about. So
Uh, data structure and how the data architecture is built for the future, how that moves. That's the biggest obstacle in sole source failure for us.
Yeah, think about the questions you want to answer or insights you want to have, and then build data solutions to get there. Don't do it in reverse. Collect a bunch of data and figure out what questions you can answer. Have a hypothesis in mind.
I will piggyback on Bob's, and I'll maybe phrase it differently. Uniformity is key. So when you're building out these data structures, I think it's invaluable that we as an industry align to similar standards such that we can share best practices together in that condensed data structured format. That cannot be stressed enough. I would love to be in the position now where we have 500 utilities sharing Hecate data, right? That's a vision of the future that I can see. That's what I'll end with.
that's a very strong vision. We're truly working towards that goal. But thank you so much for your thoughts, and thank you to the audience for the amazing questions and engagement. And that would be the end of our panel for today. For November, we will not be having one of these community of practice calls because we have our big, big, big summit. So please, please tune in for the virtual summit. I think you can still register online. But we're looking forward to be seeing you then, and I'll see you back in December with a new panel. So have a great day, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye, folks.